Hi everyone. All right, so we're going to talk about equations of circles today. This is first day, so we're just going to do kind of an introduction. Okay. Just to review, because we're going to need this later. The warm-up says write the function in vertex form by completing the square. So let's talk about it. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked about this. When you complete the square, two things have to happen. Number one, your c value, which is positive 85, must be on the other side. So we're going to have 3x squared minus 30x equals negative 85. Okay, and then the second thing, when you complete the square, you must always have an a value of 1. So whatever your a value is, you must factor it out. Okay, so if I factor out a 3, I'm left with an x squared minus 10x. And as soon as I have an a value that is 1, then I'm going to write plus blank for my c value equals negative 85 and then plus blank, so I balance my equation. Okay? So remember, the purpose of completing the square is to create a new c value, because your goal is to write this in the format in vertex form where you can say something is being squared. That way you can undo it. Okay? And then we need to figure out what value goes in there, so that's why we're picking our c value. In order to find our c value, we want to divide this by 2 and square it. So half of negative 10 is negative 5. If we square it, we get 25. Okay, we do not put a 25 on the other side, though. That would not balance it, because this is actually being distributed. So we need to put a 75 on the other side. That's what balances our equation. Okay, I always write in this dividing by 2 because that's what goes in my parentheses over here. So I have my 3 on the outside that I factored out. I can say x minus 5 squared. Okay, again, half of negative 10, because if I can check my work, negative 5 times negative 5 gives me my c value of 25, and negative 5 plus negative 5 gives me my b value of negative 10. Okay, and that equals negative 10. Okay, and then if I want to write this in, this problem says to write this in vertex form. So I'm actually not solving it. I'm not dividing by 3, taking the square root, and adding 5. Vertex form, this is my k value. I actually just move it over. So I would have 3 times x minus 5 squared plus 10. And if I write y equals, then this is the vertex form of the quadratic that I started with in standard form. Okay, if you remember back to last year, the negative 5 in here tells you that your vertex is 5, and your k value is 10, which tells you your vertex is at 5, 10. That's your hk. Okay, which we're going to talk about in the next problem. Okay, so we're going to derive the formula for a circle. Derive means that we're going to talk about one formula and how that formula creates actually the equation of a circle. So here are some things that we need to know. This is the center of my circle. Because it's the center of my circle, we call always centers or vertex or critical points, like we called them last year, h and k. And then if I draw a segment that goes to the edge of my circle, then that's just a coordinate, so x, y. Okay, and the distance of this segment, or the length of it, is my radius. Okay, so if you think about a circle, the one and only thing that creates a circle and makes up a circle, what determines how big or how small it is your radius. So if you think about circumference, the only thing you need is your radius. Area, the only thing you need is your radius. So your radius is the one thing that defines your circle. Well, radius is a length. So if we think about that in terms of length, we have a formula that allows us to find a length. It's called our distance formula. Our distance formula says distance equals the square root of the difference of my x's, so x2 minus x1 squared, plus the difference of my y's, y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, so that's the distance formula. I can use this formula with the things that I've actually listed in my diagram. So since I'm trying to find the distance of my radius, I'm going to replace that with radius equals my x's are my h and my x. Okay, and it's x2 minus x1, so I'm going to say x minus h squared plus, and then in the same order, I have my y and my k. So y minus k squared and the square root of all of this. Okay. Excuse me. I can square this side, which means I square this side. So I get that r squared equals x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. And this is the formula for my circle. So radius squared equals x minus h squared and y minus k squared. Okay, and notice that we have this x minus h and y minus k. That's what tells you your center of your circle, your h, comma k. And notice that they both have this minus sign in them, which means that it's opposite of whatever number it is. Just like vertex form, let's scroll back up, just like vertex form, that was a -5 in here, but it was a +5 in here. This was a plus k, so that's why that was 10, but in here, notice it's a minus, so it's opposite. Okay, so we have two forms of a circle. We have standard form, which standard form is what we just figured out. So typically we actually write it like this, and we say x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So my h goes with my x, and my k goes with my y. All right, and again, this right here, just so we know, this is my radius of my circle. Okay, general form is what you would get basically if you multiply all this out. You would get something that looks like ax squared plus by squared plus cx plus dy plus e equals 0. So general form is always set equal to 0 and nothing's factored. The variables are irrelevant. It just means you have a coefficient of x squared, a coefficient of y squared, a coefficient of your x, of your y, and then your e is your constant. Okay? But that'll make more sense as we work through these problems. Okay, so if we look at 1, 2, and 3, we're graphing. Okay? In order to graph these, we need three things. We need to know our center and our radius. So because this is a -4 with x, it means it's a +4 for x. Because this is a +3 with y, it means it's a -3. So opposite of both, since if we look back at my formula, it was x minus h and y minus k. This is equal to r squared. So if I square root both sides, my radius is 5. Okay, so plot the point 4, -3. Puts you here. And then if you have a radius of 5, that means up, down, left, right, everywhere you go 5. Okay. And then connect your points. Do the best that you can, and then that's what you should get. Okay. The next one, notice that the x squared doesn't have anything in parentheses, so if there's nothing there, that means that your x value is 0. Your y value, the opposite of -7, is 7. And again, this equals not your radius, it equals r squared. So take the square root, and that means you get 3. I would circle that, guys, and say that it equals r squared, so you know that you're taking the square root. Okay, so go to 0, 7, and up 3, down 3, right 3, left 3. And then do the best to draw your circle. Okay. Now, the problem with the next one is that when we take the square root of 30, we don't get something nice. Well, let's start off with my center first. The opposite of 2 is -2. There's nothing with my y, so that's just 0. My radius, so this equals r squared. So if I take the square root of 30, normally I would leave it as an exact answer. But if I leave it as an exact answer, I don't really know how to count it on a graph, so I'm actually going to estimate it, and I'm going to say that it's about 5.48 when you take the square root of it. So I'm going to plot my center at negative 2, 0, and then, I mean, we're talking on a graph, so, you know, it doesn't need to be exact. It's about 5.5. So go over about 5.5. Can't tell the difference either way. And then up and down 2. Connect your points. Okay, and then there's your circle. Hopefully better than that. All right. The last two problems, 4 and 5, are asking about translations. So we're given the circle that's already been translated. This has been moved right 10 and up 14. Okay, opposite of whatever we think. So the center would be at 10, 14, and would have a radius of 10 since the square root of 100 is 10. So just to give an idea. Now we want to take this circle, and number 4 says we want to translate it up 4 and left 11. So I always do left to right movements first, so I know that that goes with x. So the notation that goes with left 11 would say that I want to do x plus 11. Okay, again, left, I got to do the opposite. And then translating up 4 means that it goes with my y, and up means I do the opposite, so minus 4. Okay, so then what I can do because of this notation is I can just combine with what's in my equation. So if it's saying x plus 11 and this is x minus 10, just combine. So 11 plus negative 10 means that I have x plus 1 squared plus y. And if I look at I have minus 14, so I have minus 4 and plus negative 14, which gives me negative 18 squared. And then my radius, my r squared has to stay the same, otherwise I've changed my circle. Translating just means that it's getting shifted left or right or up or down, but it's not changing in size. So this would be my new function, and that would be translated up 4, left 11. Okay? So the next one, this one says right 6, so that's my x, and in order to go right, I actually have to write minus 6. Down 3, that goes with my y. Down means I have to say plus 3. Okay, and then if I combine negative 10 and negative 6, I get x minus 16 squared plus y. And if I combine 3 and negative 14, I get negative 11 squared. And it has to stay equal to 100, otherwise I've changed the size of my circle. Okay, you could also take your original center point, move them, each of what number 4 and 5 say, and then rewrite it. You would just have to pay attention to the fact that it's opposite in your formula. But 2 options. Okay, so flip it over. Write the equation of each function. So there's 3 things that, well, really 2 things that I need for my circle. I need to know my radius, and I need to know the center. Okay, so if I want to write a of x, this circle's a of x. I can find my center, usually by kind of eyeballing it, but I just need to, I would verify. So if I go from my center, I can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. I can see that it's 4 up and 4 down, so this is definitely my center. So that center point is at negative 1, 7. So I'm going to write negative 1, 7 over here. And I can then count my radius. I just counted it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. So my radius is 4. Okay, so in order to write my circle, I would say x plus 1, since it's opposite, plus y minus 7. Make sure we square both of these, otherwise it's not a circle. Equals, and then remember it's r squared, so 16. So this would be the equation of e of x. Okay, and like I said, typically we always write it equal to r squared. We don't write r squared first, but either's fine. Okay, this would be a good point for you guys to pause and then see if you can check your answers with me. See if you can do these next 2. They should be fairly easy. Okay. Okay, so assuming we're checking your answers, I'm going to guess that this is the center, but I'm going to check. So from 10 to 17 is 7, from 10 backwards to 3 is 7, from 3 up to 10 is 7, and from 3 down to negative 4 is 7 as well. So my radius is 7. and my center is at 10, 3. Okay, so I would write this as x minus 10 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals r squared, so I have to remember 2 squared. And that would be my equation. Okay? If you did not try this one, and then you can unpause it. Let's see. This one looks like it has a center here, which would be over 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, up 1, 2, 3, down 1, 2, 3. Okay, so my radius is 3. Remember, it cannot be negative. Direction is not negative. Left is just positive. Okay, and then my center is at 0, negative 2. So when I write this, since I'm not moving anything, I'm just going to write x squared. If you want, you can write x minus 0 and then square that, but you don't need to. And then plus y plus 2, opposite, squared, equals 3 squared, which is 9. Okay, and again, remember that we must square both our x's and our y's. That's what makes it a circle and not a parabola. Okay. All right, and then this bottom portion is meant for you to change from general form into standard form. So write the equation in standard form. In order to be in standard form, we must look like this. So standard form looks like this, which if you notice, standard form has a quantity being squared, and equal to a constant, which is exactly what completing the square does. You have something being squared equal to a constant. So, as much as you love completing the square, we get to do it twice. Once for x and once for y. Fun. All right. So, in doing so, what we have to do, again, this is in general form because it's x squared, y squared, your x term, your y term, and your constant, and then set equal to 0. So what we're doing is changing from general form into standard form, because if we do that, standard form is what tells me my center and my radius. So then I can actually determine those two things, and I could graph my circle and answer questions like what's the area, what's the arc length, what's the circumference, those types of things. Okay? So first things, I want to group together my x's and I want to group together my y's. So I'm going to group together x squared minus 8x and plus y squared plus 2y, and I'm going to move that c value to the other, or that constant to the other side. Okay, and again, we're going to complete the square twice. We're going to do it once for x and once for y. So notice that both of them have coefficients of 1. So I'm going to say x squared minus 8x plus blank, since my a value is 1, plus y squared plus 2y plus blank, since my coefficient is 1, equals negative 2. But I have to say plus blank plus blank. Okay, since there's 2 blanks on the left, there's got to be 2 blanks on the right. Okay, I take half of this value and square it. So half of this is negative 4, squared is 16. Half of this is 1, squared is 1. There's no coefficient to multiply these numbers by, so I put a 16 over here and a 1 over here. Okay, so I can rewrite my function now. And I can say the purpose for creating the 16 was so that I could say x minus half of negative 8 is negative 4 squared plus y, half of 2 is positive 1 squared. And on this side, if I add these things together, let's see, what do I get? I get 17 minus 2, which is 15. So this is the standard form of my circle. Okay, that standard form tells me that my center is at 4, negative 1, and my radius, remember I set this equal to r squared, my radius is the square root of this. Okay, and we're going to give our answer an exact. So I could say that my radius is square root of 15 units. Or I could take the square root of 15, which tells me that my radius is about 3.87 units. Okay, it kind of depends. It depends on what format we want this in. If we're graphing, we want to use 3.87 because, easier to graph that than it is root 15. If it's asking for an exact answer, square root of 15. Okay? Either of them is fine if I don't specifically ask. Okay, number 7, let's try it again. Maybe try this one on your own or at least get started on it. Okay. All right, so we are going to separate our x's and separate our y's. Notice that our x's and y's both have coefficients this time. Okay, so we're going to have 4x squared minus 8x plus 4y squared plus 2y, and then we're going to move that negative, or that 2 to the other side, making it a negative 2. Okay, with both the x's and the y's, I have a coefficient of 4. The only way to complete the square is you must have a coefficient of 1. So I'm going to factor a 4 out of my x squared, making it x squared minus 2x. Since my coefficient of x squared is 1, I'm going to say plus blank. Okay, and then plus, I'm going to factor 4 out of y squared. All right, which gives me y squared plus, and then this is where it gets kind of a pain. So if I take 2 and divide it by 4, I do not get 2. 2 divided by 4 gives me 1/2 y plus blank equals negative 2, and then plus blank plus blank. Okay, so again, I want to take half of this and square it. So half of negative 2 is negative 1. Squared gives me 1. And then over here, I want to take half of 1/2. Again, not multiplying. I'm saying half of 1/2, which is 1/4. Okay, and now I need to figure out what goes on my other side. I did not put a 1 on this side. In order to balance it, I actually put a 4. So I would always draw this line in so you don't forget. And 4 times 1/4 is 1. Okay, so my function is going to be 4. And then in parentheses, I'm going to have x. Half of negative 2, again, this is why I always write in the divided by 2, is minus 1 squared plus 4 times y. Half of 1/2 is 1/4. So plus 1/4 squared. And actually we have to fix something, I'm sorry. So let's erase this, start with this. Let's erase this. And erase this. Okay, let's fix this. So, once we take half of this, I forgot to square it. You always take half and square. So if we have 1/2 and we divide by 2, we get 1/4. But then we have to square that. So I'm just going to write this over here. We have half of 1/2 is 1/4, but then we have to square that. So if we square that, 1 squared is 1, 4 squared is 16. Okay? And then when we multiply 4 times 1/16, we get 4 over 16, which makes this 1/4. Okay? And now when we come back to this equation, half of 1/2, this is where 1/4 goes in. Okay, and then I can see that this is right because 1/4 times 1/4 gives me 1/16, and 1/4 plus 1/4 gives me 1/2. Equals, and then I need to add these things together. So negative 2 plus 4 is 2. 2 plus 1/4 is 2 1/4. Which I'm actually going to just leave like that for a second because I'm actually going to have to change this anyways. Now, one of the big things about the fact that we're writing a circle, circles in general form never have any coefficients in front of your x squared. So notice up here, this was just a 1 and this was just a 1. They always have to be a 1. So since these are 4s, we actually need to divide this whole side by 4, which means we have to divide this side by 4. By dividing the left side by 4, we get left with x minus 1 squared plus y plus 1/4 squared equals, I'm actually going to use my, well, you can do this without a calculator actually. 2 1/4, 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9, so I'm going to write it over here. You get 9/4, and then if we want to divide by 4, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, so divide by 4 is the same as multiplying by 1/4. Nothing cancels, so 9 times 1 is 9 over 16. So 9/16. Okay. All right, and then I can now, so using this, I can now identify my center. So my center is at 1 and -1/4. And my radius is the square root of this. So if I have this as a radius, I can square root it. Okay, if I square root 9, I get 3. And if I square root 16, I get 4. So my radius is 3/4, 0.75 units. Whew. Okay, let's try another one. This one's a little lengthy too. Just anytime you have your coefficients in front of your x squared, this is what's going to happen. Okay, and then I want to start you off by saying, you can see that in this problem, everything is divisible by 2. You have 2x squared, 2y squared, 12x, 24y, 72. You cannot start by saying this whole side divided by 2 and this whole side divided by 2. If you do, you're going to end up with the wrong answer in the end. Okay, mathematically you could solve and still get things correct if you solve, but we're not solving, we're rewriting. If you divide by 2, in the end you're going to have an answer that is half of what you actually should have. So do not divide by 2. We only do that in factoring, not rewriting. Okay, since factoring is solving, or we use it to solve. Okay, so I'm going to erase this. So don't do that. Okay. So I'm going to start by grouping together, and I'm going to actually skip a step here. So I can see that here's my x squared and here's my x. I have a 2, so I know I'm going to factor out a 2. By factoring out a 2, I'm left with x squared plus 6x plus blank. Okay, again, I know it's plus blank because I have a 1x squared. And then my y's are here and here. So I'm going to say plus, again, 2. I'm going to factor out a 2. These numbers will always be the same when they're a circle. So I have y squared minus 12y plus blank equals, and then we had to add the 72 to the side, and then plus blank plus blank. Okay? Alright, so half of this, you might want to try finishing this problem, and then you can kind of unpause where is necessary. So we take half of this and we have to square it. So half of this is 3, squared gives me 9. Half of this is -6, squared is 36. To balance, distribute, I get 18. Distribute, I get 72. Okay? I can rewrite this as 2. Half of 6 is 3, so plus 3 squared. Again, double check. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6, so it's good. Plus 2 times y. Half of -12 is -6 squared. Okay, again, double check. Square this, you get 36. Add it, you get -12, so we're good. Equals, on this side, 72 and 72 is 144. Plus 18 gives me 162. Okay, now I want to divide by 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. So I get x plus 3 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals 81. And then that's my standard form. Now that I'm in standard form, I can see that my center is opposite -3, opposite 6, and I can see that my radius is 9 units. It's the square root of 81 is 9. Okay? On Monday, we're going to do some more writing and some more moving of circles around and answering some questions now that I can write all these forms. All right? Thank you.